My daughter-in-law forged my signature and stole my 50 million farm. Now you're going to live in the chicken coop, you useless old woman, she shouted. I just smiled. My revenge was perfect. Listen to my story until the end and tell me which city you're watching me from. That way, I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, and I am 78 years old. Everything started on a Tuesday morning in late September, when the autumn leaves were just beginning to turn their brilliant shades of gold and crimson. I had been living peacefully on Whitmore Estate, the sprawling $50 million farm that had been in our family for 4 generations, when my world was turned upside down by the cruelest betrayal imaginable. I remember that morning so clearly because it began like any other. I was in my favorite rocking chair on the wraparound porch, sipping my morning tea and watching the sunrise paint the rolling hills in soft pastels. The farm stretched out before me like a living tapestry, hundreds of acres of fertile land, dotted with barns, silos, and the charming white farmhouse where I had raised my son Marcus and lived with my dear husband Robert until his passing 5 years ago. Marcus had always been a good boy, though perhaps a bit weak-willed when it came to matters of the heart. He had married Vivian 3 years ago, a woman 20 years his junior, with platinum blonde hair, sharp green eyes, and a smile that never quite reached those calculating orbs. From the moment I met her, I sensed something predatory about Vivian, something that set my grandmother's intuition on high alert. But Marcus was smitten, and I held my tongue, hoping for the best. That morning, as I sat enjoying the peaceful dawn, I heard the sound of expensive heels clicking against the wooden porch steps. Vivian appeared around the corner, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her perfectly manicured red nails clutched a manila envelope, and her usual fake smile was replaced by something far more sinister. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said, though her tone suggested it was anything but good. "I hope you slept well, because it's going to be your last comfortable night in this house." I set down my teacup carefully, my hands surprisingly steady despite the ice that was forming in my veins. "I beg your pardon, dear." Vivian's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, drop the sweet grandmother act, it's over." She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of legal documents. "You see, Marcus inherited this farm when Robert died, as we all know. But what you don't know is that he's decided to transfer ownership to me, completely. Every acre, every building, every last chicken in your precious coop." My blood ran cold as she showed me the documents. There, in what appeared to be my own shaky handwriting, was my signature on a transfer deed, witnessed and notarized. According to these papers, I was voluntarily signing over my rights to live on the property to my son, who had then immediately transferred everything to his wife. "This is impossible," I whispered, though even as I said it I could see how convincing the forgery was. "I never signed any such document." "Oh, but you did," Vivian said with mock sympathy. "Your memory isn't what it used to be, is it, Eleanor? Age does terrible things to the mind. Marcus and I have been so worried about your mental state lately, the way you've been forgetting things, getting confused about dates and names. It's really quite sad." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. This was more than simple greed. This was a calculated campaign to steal everything my family had built over generations. "Where is Marcus?" I demanded, finding my voice stronger than I expected. "Oh, he's in the city on business, won't be back for several days," which is perfect really, because it gives you time to adjust to your new living arrangements. Vivian's smile was pure venom. "You see, Eleanor, this is my house now, my farm, my life, and there's simply no room for you in it." I stood up slowly, my arthritis making me move more carefully than I would have liked. "This is my family's land. I was born in this house. I raised my children here. I buried my husband in the cemetery beyond the apple orchard. You cannot simply steal it from me." "Steal?" Vivian laughed again, that horrible sound that would haunt my dreams for weeks to come. "I'm not stealing anything. I have the legal documents right here. Everything is perfectly legitimate. You signed over your rights, and Marcus transferred ownership to me. It's all very clean and legal." She walked closer, her heels clicking ominously on the wooden porch. "Now, I'm not completely heartless. I'm prepared to let you stay on the property. There's a lovely little space in the chicken coop that should suit someone of your reduced circumstances quite well." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. "The chicken coop? Oh, yes," Vivian said, clearly enjoying my shock. "It's got 4 walls and a roof, which is more than most homeless old women get. You should be grateful, and who knows, maybe the company of the chickens will be good for you. You can spend your remaining years cleaning up after them, feeding them, collecting their eggs. Think of it as purpose in your twilight years." I stared at her. This woman who had married my son and was now systematically destroying everything I held dear. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of the tears or protests she was clearly expecting, I felt a calm settle over me. A deep, abiding calm that came from knowing something she didn't. I smiled. "That's an interesting proposition," I said quietly. "The chicken coop, you say?" Vivian's eyes narrowed, clearly not expecting this reaction. "Yes, the chicken coop. I hope you're not planning to make this difficult, Eleanor. The legal documents are ironclad. I've had my lawyers go over them thoroughly." "Oh, I'm sure you have," I replied, still smiling. "And I'm sure they're very impressive lawyers. Very expensive ones too, I'd imagine." "The best money can buy," Vivian said proudly. "Corporate law, estate planning, real estate transactions, they handle everything for the city's elite families." "How wonderful for you," I said, beginning to rock gently in my chair again. "Tell me, dear, have you actually visited the chicken coop recently?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "What? No, of course not. Why would I waste my time in that filthy place?" "Oh, it's not filthy at all," I assured her. "I've been taking very good care of it. Very good care indeed. You see, my dear departed Robert was quite the craftsman. He renovated that chicken coop himself about 15 years ago. Built it from the ground up, actually. Made it much larger than it needed to be for our modest flock." Vivian was beginning to look impatient. "I don't see what this has to do with anything. Pack your belongings and move out to the coop by sunset, or I'll have the sheriff's department escort you there." "Oh, but it has everything to do with everything," I said, my smile growing wider. "You see, Robert was a very thorough man, very detail-oriented, and he had quite the fascination with hidden spaces and secret compartments. A hobby he picked up during his time in the military, actually." For the first time since this conversation began, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Vivian's eyes. "When he renovated the chicken coop," I continued, "he built in a rather ingenious hidden room behind the back wall. Climate-controlled, secure, completely invisible unless you know exactly where to look. He used it to store important documents, family heirlooms, things he wanted to keep safe from fire or flood or theft." Vivian's face had gone very pale. "What are you getting at, old woman?" "Well," I said, setting down my teacup and folding my hands in my lap, "it's funny that you should mention the chickens, because that's where I keep my real will." The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the morning birds singing in the oak trees and the distant lowing of cattle in the far pasture. Vivian stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, the legal documents trembling in her perfectly manicured hands. "Your what?" she finally managed to whisper. "My real will," I repeated cheerfully. "You see, dear, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. And I'm certainly not as trusting as my poor son seems to be. The moment you married Marcus, I knew exactly what kind of person you were. Oh, you hid it well from him, but you couldn't hide it from me. I've lived too long and seen too much to be fooled by a pretty face and a sweet voice." I stood up again, moving with more confidence now. "So I took precautions, legal precautions. I had my own lawyers, not the flashy corporate types you favor, but old-fashioned family lawyers who've been serving the Whitmore family for decades, draft a new will. A very specific will that makes certain provisions in case anyone ever tried to steal my family's legacy." Vivian's face was cycling through emotions. confusion, fear, anger, disbelief. That's impossible. You're lying. You're just a senile old woman trying to scare me. Am I? I asked mildly. Would you like to see for yourself? We could take a walk down to the chicken coop right now. I'd be happy to show you Robert's handiwork and my insurance policy. Adul. But even as I spoke, I could see that Vivian was already mentally scrambling, trying to figure out her next move. The calculating look was back in her eyes, but now it was tinged with desperation. Even if that's true, she said, her voice regaining some of its earlier venom, it doesn't matter. The documents I have are legal and binding. You signed them. The witnesses saw you sign them. The notary public validated your signature. What you're talking about is just wishful thinking. Ndil, oh, but that's where you're wrong, dear, I said, enjoying myself more than I had in months. You see, there are a few things your expensive lawyers failed to explain to you about property law and estate planning. I walked to the porch railing and looked out over my beloved farm. First, there's the little matter of mental competency. For a legal document like the one you're holding to be valid, the person signing it must be of sound mind and acting of their own free will. But you've just spent the last 10 minutes telling me about my failing memory, my confusion, my declining mental state. In fact, I believe you mentioned that you and Marcus have been worried about my mental condition for some time now. Vivian's eyes widened as she began to understand the trap I was laying. Second, I continued, there's the question of coercion and undue influence. You see, a document signed under duress, or signed by someone who was pressured or manipulated by a family member or caregiver, is not legally binding, and I suspect that if we were to investigate your relationship with my son, we might find some very interesting patterns of behavior. You can't prove any of that, Vivian said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Can't I? I turned back to face her. Tell me, dear, who do you think has been documenting your behavior toward me over the past 3 years? Who do you think has been quietly recording your little outbursts, your cruel comments, your obvious attempts to isolate me from my son and manipulate him against me? The color drained completely from Vivian's face. You've been recording me? Oh, my dear girl, I said with a laugh that was far warmer than hers had been. You really don't know anything about old people, do you? We may move slowly, but we're not blind or deaf or stupid. I've been watching you since the day you walked into our lives, and I've been preparing for this moment ever since I realized what you were planning. I walked back to my rocking chair and picked up what Vivian had probably assumed was just another one of my mystery novels. Instead, I opened it to reveal a small digital recorder nestled inside the hollowed-out pages. This little device has been my constant companion for the past year, I explained. Amazing what technology can do these days, isn't it? It's voice-activated, has a memory capacity of several hundred hours, and the audio quality is remarkably clear. I've captured some truly fascinating conversations between you and Marcus, some phone calls you've made to your friends, some rather heated discussions you've had with various lawyers and real estate agents. Vivian lunged toward me, but I was ready for that reaction. I pressed a button on the device, and her own voice filled the air, crystal clear and unmistakably damning. The old bat won't live forever, and when she's gone, all of this will be ours. We just need to speed up the process a little bit. Stop it, Vivian shrieked, but I let the recording continue. Marcus is so pathetically devoted to his mommy that he'll never see what's really happening. But once I have control of the farm, I can sell it to that development company and we'll be rich enough to live anywhere we want. The old woman will be in a nursing home or dead, and nobody will care about her sob story. I pressed the stop button and looked at Vivian's horrified face with satisfaction. Oh, but it gets much better. I have recordings of you discussing forging my signature with someone you referred to as your document specialist. I have recordings of you practicing my handwriting. I have recordings of you researching nursing homes and discussing how to have me declared mentally incompetent. Vivian collapsed into one of the porch chairs, her face buried in her hands. How? She whispered. How did you know? Because I'm not the doddering old fool you took me for, I replied firmly. "I've been managing this farm's business affairs for decades. I've negotiated contracts, handled legal disputes, managed investments, and dealt with more smooth-talking swindlers than you could imagine. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my own daughter-in-law started treating me like an obstacle to be removed?" I sat back down in my rocking chair and began to rock gently, enjoying the morning breeze and the look of absolute defeat on Vivian's face. "Now," I said conversationally, "let's talk about that chicken coop again. You see, the real will I mentioned isn't just a backup plan, it's a masterpiece of legal planning. It includes provisions for exactly this sort of situation. If anyone ever attempts to forge my signature, manipulate my son, or steal my family's property through fraud or coercion, the will activates a series of very interesting consequences." Vivian looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What kind of consequences?" "Well, first, ownership of the entire estate, all $50 million worth, transfers immediately to a trust managed by my lawyers and my old friend, Judge Harrison. You remember Judge Harrison, don't you? He's been handling family legal matters in this county for 40 years. He's also the one who will be reviewing all the evidence of your fraudulent activities." I paused to take another sip of my tea, savoring both the beverage and Vivian's growing panic. Second, the will provides for a full forensic investigation of any suspicious documents or signatures. I've already paid for handwriting analysis, document examination, and digital forensics. "The evidence against you is quite overwhelming, I'm afraid." "You can't do this," Vivian whispered. "Marcus loves me. He won't believe you." "Oh, my dear," I said sadly. "Marcus already knows." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Vivian's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, hope, fear, and finally understanding. "You see," I continued, "my son may be naive about matters of the heart, but he's not stupid about matters of law and family loyalty. When I showed him the evidence I'd gathered, the recordings, the documents, the investigation into your background, he was devastated, but he wasn't surprised. I reached into my sweater pocket and pulled out my phone. In fact, he asked me to give you this message." I pressed play on a voice message, and Marcus's familiar voice filled the air, though it sounded older and more tired than I'd ever heard it. "Vivian, by the time you hear this, you'll know that Mother discovered your plan. I want you to know that I loved you, or at least I loved who I thought you were. But what you tried to do to my mother, to my family, to everything we've built over generations, that's unforgivable. The marriage is over. The prenuptial agreement you signed will ensure that you leave with nothing but your personal belongings. Don't try to contact me. Don't try to fight this in court. You've lost." I turned off the phone and looked at Vivian's stricken face. "He's filing for divorce this afternoon. Fraud and attempted theft are excellent grounds for voiding a prenuptial agreement, don't you think?" Vivian sat in stunned silence for several minutes, and I let her absorb the full impact of her situation. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been respect, mixed with hatred. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Known what? Specifically?" "About all of it. About what I was planning." I considered the question seriously. "I suspected something from the beginning, as I mentioned, but I knew for certain about 6 months ago, when I overheard you on the phone with someone discussing property values and development opportunities. That's when I started recording everything and building my case." 6 months, Vivian repeated hollowly. "You've been planning this for 6 months." "Longer than that, actually," I admitted. "I've been updating my will and putting protective measures in place for almost 2 years, ever since I realized that you saw me as an obstacle rather than a family member." Vivian suddenly straightened up, and I saw a flash of her old defiance. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you've outsmarted me completely." "Haven't I?" "Maybe," she said, standing up and smoothing down her expensive suit. "But you've lost your son in the process. You've destroyed his marriage, humiliated him, made him choose between his wife and his mother. How do you think he's going to feel about you when the dust settles? How do you think your relationship with him will survive this?" For the first time since this conversation began, I felt a pang of genuine sadness. "That's a risk I had to take," I said quietly, "because if I hadn't acted, you would have succeeded in stealing everything, and Marcus would have discovered the truth eventually anyway. At least this way, he'll still have his inheritance and his family's legacy." "His family's legacy?" Vivian repeated mockingly. "A crumbling old farm in the middle of nowhere, run by a paranoid old woman who trusts no one and sees enemies everywhere. What a wonderful legacy to preserve." I stood up again, my back straight despite my years. This crumbling old farm has supported 4 generations of Whitmores. It's employed hundreds of people over the decades, fed thousands of families, and preserved some of the most beautiful and fertile land in the region. It's not just a piece of property, it's a living piece of history, a connection to the past and a bridge to the future. I walked to the porch railing again and looked out over the fields where my husband had worked, where my son had played as a child, where I hoped someday my grandchildren might run and laugh and build their own memories. "You saw it as nothing but dollar signs," I continued. $50 million worth of assets to be liquidated and spent on a lifestyle of luxury and excess. You never understood what it really represented. "And what does it represent, Eleanor?" Vivian asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Besides an old woman's stubborn refusal to accept that times change." I turned back to face her, and I saw something flicker across her face. Perhaps a recognition that she had pushed too far, or perhaps just surprise at the steel in my voice when I answered. "It represents the difference between people who build things and people who destroy them," I said. "The difference between those who create value and those who simply consume it. The difference between family and greed." Vivian stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. "You're living in the past, Eleanor. This whole place is living in the past. Agriculture is a dying industry, small farms are obsolete, and sentimental attachment to land is just another word for financial stupidity." "Is it?" I asked. "Then why were you so eager to get your hands on this obsolete property? Why did you spend so much time and effort planning to steal something that's supposedly worthless?" She had no answer for that, of course, because the truth was that Whitmore Estate was far from worthless or obsolete. Under my management and with Marcus's help, we had modernized our operations, diversified our crops, and built relationships with sustainable agriculture companies and organic food distributors. The farm was more profitable now than it had ever been, and the land itself was becoming increasingly valuable as development pressure grew in the region. But Vivian had seen only the surface. An old woman, a naive son, and a lot of valuable assets ripe for the taking. She had never bothered to understand the complexity of what she was trying to steal. "I want you off my property within the hour," I said firmly. "Take your forged documents, your expensive lawyers, and your broken dreams, and don't come back." "And if I refuse?" she asked, though there was no real fight left in her voice. "Then I'll have you arrested for fraud, forgery, attempted theft, and conspiracy. The sheriff is a family friend, and Judge Harrison is already aware of the situation. You'll be in jail within 2 hours, and your face will be on the front page of every newspaper in the region by tomorrow morning." Vivian picked up her manila envelope with shaking hands. The legal documents that had seemed so powerful and intimidating an hour ago now looked like what they really were. Elaborate fakes that would crumble under the first serious legal challenge. "This isn't over," she said, but it sounded more like a prayer than a threat. "Yes, it is," I replied calmly. "It's been over since the moment you decided that my family's love and trust were things you could exploit for profit. You never had a chance of succeeding because you fundamentally misunderstood what you were dealing with." She walked toward the porch steps, her expensive heels clicking hollowly on the wooden planks. But halfway to the steps, she stopped and turned back to face me. "I almost feel sorry for you," she said, and for the first time since this conversation began, she sounded genuinely sincere. "You've won your precious farm, but you've lost everything else. Your son will never trust anyone again after this. He'll never remarry, never give you grandchildren, never fully forgive himself for being fooled, or fully forgive you for the way you handled it. You'll die alone in this big empty house with nothing but your memories and your principles to keep you company." Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit, because there was truth in them. Marcus would be hurt by this betrayal for a long time, and our relationship would need careful rebuilding. There would be no more family dinners with laughter and easy conversation, no more hopes for grandchildren playing in the yard, no more simple trust between mother and son. But as I looked out over the rolling fields and remembered all the generations of Whitmores who had faced their own challenges and made their own sacrifices to preserve this legacy, I knew I had made the right choice. "Perhaps," I said quietly, "but I'll die knowing that I protected what mattered most. And Marcus will eventually understand that some things are worth fighting for, even when the cost is high." Vivian shook her head and continued down the steps. I watched her walk across the yard toward the expensive sports car she had parked near the main gate. Her movements were sharp and angry, but also defeated. She was already planning her next move, I was sure, but it wouldn't involve Whitmore Estate or the Whitmore family. As her car disappeared down the long driveway, I settled back into my rocking chair and allowed myself to truly relax for the first time in months. The immediate crisis was over, but I knew that the real work was just beginning. I needed to call Judge Harrison and make sure all the legal protections were properly activated. I needed to contact the sheriff and provide him with copies of all my evidence, just in case Vivian tried some desperate last-minute gambit. I needed to reach out to Marcus and begin the delicate process of healing our relationship. Most importantly, I needed to visit the chicken coop. I smiled to myself as I stood up and made my way down the porch steps. Vivian had been so focused on her forged documents and her elaborate schemes that she had never stopped to question why I was so calm, so confident, so completely unafraid of her threats. The chicken coop sat about 200 yards from the main house, a charming white building with red trim that looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a home for our small flock of heritage breed chickens. But as I approached it, I could see the subtle signs of Robert's craftsmanship that Vivian had missed. The building was larger than necessary for our modest flock, with unusually thick walls and a foundation that went deeper than any chicken coop required. The electrical system was more sophisticated than it appeared, with multiple circuits and backup power supplies hidden behind false panels. I went to the back corner of the building, where a section of wall looked identical to every other section, unless you knew exactly what to look for. I pressed my hand against a specific board, twisted it slightly to the right, and felt the hidden mechanism click open. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing Robert's secret room. The space was climate-controlled and dehumidified, about the size of a small bedroom, but lined with fireproof filing cabinets and safety deposit boxes. This was where we had always kept our most important documents, backup copies of everything, family heirlooms, and emergency cash reserves. And there, in a specially marked filing cabinet, was the real will. I pulled out the thick legal document and read through it once more, even though I had memorized every word. It was a masterpiece of legal planning, crafted by lawyers who understood both estate law and family dynamics. It protected the farm from being sold or subdivided, established trust funds for future generations, provided for the care and preservation of the property, and included detailed instructions for exactly the situation I had just faced. But the most important provision was the one I hadn't mentioned to Vivian. The one that would ensure Marcus's future happiness and the continuation of the Whitmore family legacy. The will included a substantial trust fund specifically designated for Marcus's future children, my eventual grandchildren. The fund would pay for their education, help them start their own careers, and give them the option to return to the farm someday if they chose. It was structured in a way that no spouse or in-law could ever access or control, ensuring that the family legacy would pass to the next generation intact. More than that, the will included provisions for Marcus himself, funds for his education, his business ventures, his future happiness. I had never wanted to control his life or limit his choices. I had only wanted to protect him from people like Vivian, who would use his good nature against him. I carefully returned the will to its fireproof container and sealed the secret room. As I walked back toward the house, I could hear my phone ringing from the porch. It was Marcus. "Mother." His voice sounded strained and tired. "Is it over?" "Yes, dear," I said gently. "It's over. She's gone." There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, I could hear tears in his voice. "I'm so sorry, Mother. I'm sorry I didn't see what she was doing. I'm sorry I let it go so far. I'm sorry you had to handle all of this alone." "You're not alone now," I said firmly, "and you never have to apologize for loving someone, even when they don't deserve it. That's not a weakness, Marcus. That's what makes you a good man." "I don't feel like a good man right now," he said quietly. "I feel like a fool." "Then let me tell you something your father once told me," I said, settling back into my rocking chair and looking out over the land that would someday be his. He said that the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes, but what they do after they realize they've made them. You realized the truth, you stood up for what was right, and you chose family over personal comfort. That makes you exactly the kind of man this family needs. We talked for another hour, working through the immediate practical issues and beginning to rebuild the trust that Vivian had tried so hard to destroy. It would take time, I knew, but we would get through this together. As the sun set over Whitmore Estate that evening, I sat on my porch and reflected on the day's events. I thought about Vivian, probably in some lawyer's office right now, trying to find a way to salvage her situation. I thought about Marcus, driving home from the city with divorce papers in his briefcase and a broken heart that would eventually heal. I thought about my dear Robert, who would have been so proud of the way his secret room had served its purpose. Most of all, I thought about the future. Someday, perhaps sooner than I expected, I would need to pass on the responsibility for this place to the next generation. When that time came, I wanted to be sure that whoever inherited Whitmore Estate understood not just its financial value, but its true worth as a home, a legacy, and a trust held for future generations. I had protected it from Vivian's greed, but protection was only the first step. The real work, the work of building something lasting and meaningful, was still ahead of us. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I heard the sound of a car coming up the long driveway. Marcus was coming home, ready to begin again, ready to learn from his mistakes and move forward. Together, we would make sure that Whitmore Estate remained what it had always been. Not just a piece of valuable property, but a true family home. The chickens were settling in for the night, making their soft, clucking sounds in the distance. I smiled, thinking about how appropriate it was that they had played such an important role in this day's victory. Sometimes the most important battles are won not with dramatic gestures or grand strategies, but with careful preparation, patient observation, and the wisdom to know when and how to act. Sometimes the key to protecting everything you love is hidden in the most unlikely places. And sometimes, when someone threatens to send you to live in the chicken coop, the best response is simply to smile and say, "How wonderful that you mentioned the chickens." And because you never know what secrets might be hidden behind those humble walls, waiting for exactly the right moment to change everything.